in team event 57 of Team 4545 League in the 9th round of the playoffs. And let's have a look and see what happens. It's a pretty interesting game. It's decided in the ending. It's a nice endgame technique. And then we'll try to look at how the loser could have maybe prevented this, because you don't lose a game until you make a mistake. It was one of those games where the small mistake came and the end game took over. End game technique. Okay, here's one of those mistakes right there, H6. Now it really doesn't have a bearing on this game, but what is Black doing? Okay, I see this in games rated down 11, 12, 1300 all the time. Somebody plays this move to keep a white piece out of this square. In descriptive notation we call that knight 5. It's not going to do anything there. Black has recourses. I just don't understand these moves. It's just a total waste of a move. And as it turns out, that pawn is going to be lost later. So not only Black playing a tempo down, he's going to lose that pawn, and that's the pawn that costs him the game. So there's the irony of it all. But anyway, it's not a critical mistake. It just makes it a little tougher. Now Black does the smart thing. He starts getting developed. And now Black decides to go into the Boleslavsky style variation. Now they took their time in this game. I'm not going to bring up the timestamp thing on this necessarily and isolate every single move. It's just, to try to criticize, like, what are you doing? It's not a bad setup. I don't think it's necessarily the best move. But you see, Black's already played H6, so he's taking certain fundamental weaknesses into his position where White's pawn structure is intact. And it's known that Black can play this pawn structure here with the pawns on D6 and C6. Black can survive that just fine. But still, that little tempo on H6, it doesn't seem to It doesn't seem to fit the style here. H6 is a move I'm sure Black wishes he had back. Okay, but let's just go forward. And now White's playing H3. What's White doing? Why is White trying to keep something out of G4? What's Black going to do on G4? Let's see. The only thing I can think of, he's afraid of, if he moves his bishop somewhere, that the queen will come to B6 and then that'll go to G4 and there'll be an attack on 2 pawns. I don't know. Where's White going to put the bishop? Well, if you put it on E3, I guess you want to put the bishop there. You don't want knight G4. That does stop queen B6. Okay, so maybe he wants to keep the knight out of G4 in order to put the bishop on E3. So since Black spent a tempo, we'll forgive White. Okay. But I always have to stop and question why I see some of these moves. Sometimes I see it so often in the games I analyze for my own students and the people they play, and for past games in this league. Anyway, there it is, bishop E3. Okay, so all's fine. And now this is kind of an interesting move. It's an attempt by White to try to generate something, and I don't think it was the right choice. But as it turns out, it was very difficult for Black to get anything out of this. Now Black has a little trick here, and my first impression when I played through this game was that Black was getting the better of it. But then as the game went on, Black didn't have the better of it at all. Matter of fact, the game kind of became even, and it was White that ends up with the winning chances. But Black has a tactic here, and you can't fault Black for playing what he does. You can't really foresee this thing out to the logical conclusion that it eventually came to, an ending decided by a positional and material advantage. But anyway, it perfect sense to play this move. Black has the bishop pair for what it's worth, and when you have the bishop here, you want the position open, and the best way to make those bishops good is to open up the center. Suddenly the bishop on C6 has picked up a lot of scope, and then Black stops and regains the piece, and then White takes his pawn back. Okay, so what's happened? Neither side is going to get a mating attack against the other. Okay, that's not going to happen unless somebody blunders. But what's going to happen is you're going to get into some kind of an ending here shortly. The D file is opened up. Some heavy artillery can disappear in a hurry. White has an outside pawn majority, but that may not be all that useful, simply because black has the two bishops. Theoretically, it's possible that if eventually white gets down to one pass pawn, it'd be an isolated pawn. It'd be one pawn left on the queen side, and with the bishop here, it might be that black could win that pawn and then try to conduct operations on the king side with 4 pawns against 3. And with 2 bishops against a bishop and knight, there's a good chance that that black can win that. So if I had to bet money on the winner, my money's on black right at this stage, although the game is still objectively even. So white wants to go into an ending, and I'm not sure if this is the right choice. Now, here, the move that black plays seems perfectly logical, but I don't think it's the right move. And let's talk about why. The bishop's got to go somewhere, okay? You don't want to play g5 and drop a pawn with check, okay? So what's weak in black's position now? Well, he's got a little fundamental weakness over here on g7, simply, or on his, well, not on g7. He's got a little fundamental weakness in on his pawns. His pawn is tied down to g7. That's what I meant to say in this particular position. But the other weakness in the black position is this square right here at d8 or b6. So I get ahead of myself. I think the key move here is to play bishop d8, and the purpose of bishop d8 is we're going to keep the white bishop out of b6. That's what we're going to do. Now, this requires a little punting on black's part. Okay, what black has to do is say, okay, I can't do much right now, but I'm going to have to re-coordinate so I can do something, so I can utilize the one advantage I have, the bishop pair. And let's see what can white do against this. Well, he probably wants to leave this knight here on f5 as long as he can. That's just a good square for it. The other idea would be to try to contest this control of b6 with a knight transfer here, then maybe try to drop the bishop in. What's going to happen eventually is the dark squared bishops are going to be exchanged, and white's going to have a good knight against a bad bishop, and we'll see when we get there. I kind of want to give that hint. But if you're playing for a win, you don't want to trade pieces. You want to keep your pieces on the board. The logic is that you want to say with confidence that you can do more with your pieces than your opponent can do with yours. I remember years ago when before I even played a rated game, I was about 12 years old. I was reading a book. It was I couldn't even tell you the name of the book, but there was a 4 minor piece ending. And they were saying it's rare that there's a 4 minor piece ending, and one side had a positional advantage. And the side with the pieces, or the less mobility, was trying to offer trades. And the one with the 4 pieces wouldn't trade, and the commentator was white does, or black, whichever color it was, doesn't want to trade pieces. He'd rather let his opponent's pieces stew in their own juice. So, that kind of made an impression on me that as I look back at my early memories and say, that expression, yeah, if the pieces are bad, let them stay bad. Use yours. So the strategy that black has to do with bishop d8 is a punting strategy, and part of it is, meaning he's giving up possession of the ball. He's got to regroup. Okay, he's got to get rid of this knight here on f5, and that's not that easy to do. One reason, because of this weakening move here. It's going to be hard to play g6 because that pawn's going to drop. So black has to stop and take some time to do this. He might have to play h5 just to get that pawn out of the way, then play g6. Okay, so there he would have lost a tempo. We got to get rid of that knight, but then again, we may not be in any hurry to get rid of that knight too, simply because if white's going to implement a strategy of as I've outlined, of knight d6 and knight c4, don't waste time doing this pawn move. Let white do it on his own. So for the first case, it's white's move. If white plays knight d6 in this position, black no longer has to go through this exercise to keep some of those squares away from white. Black can go ahead and conduct operations accordingly. And in this case, the key move now would be bishop d6, or I'm sorry, bishop c7, attacking d6. Now the point is, now we've got the rooks reconnected. How long does white want to keep this knight there? Well, he may not want to keep it there at all. Okay, let's go ahead and use the strategy I was saying. Let's see what happens if white tries to contest b6. Okay, so now it's time for black to get his rook out of there. Now's a good time to play this. And if, well, let's see. If bishop b6 now, what white can do is, or black can do is, usually I don't want to make an exchange that develops your opponent's pieces, but here we're doing it to keep this bishop on the board. Okay, now black's preserved the bishop pair. Okay, you see how I did that maneuvering? Black kept both bishops on the board. He doesn't want to trade one off. He wants to keep them both on the board. And then, now, it's true white controls the d file, but what's white going to do with it? You see, white can use d2 and d3. He can't put his rook anywhere else. He can put it on d8, but I think that helps black. Okay, because black's looking for an ending where he can use his bishop, and now he just brings the king over. And I think black has the better game here. It's just that simple. Black's got the two bishops, and he's proved that, or he's going to attempt to prove that he can do more with his two bishops than white can do with his bishop and knight. Now, this wasn't a forced variation by any means. Okay, let's revert back to the beginning of it. All I'm saying is this was my plan was control of this b6 square. Let's keep white out of it, and then when you go to, one way to logically conclude when you're analyzing a position is say, well, what happens if he tries to go there anyway? Because white can go there, as I demonstrated. And now, is that the best plan? Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. You're only as good as you can see. What you can see in a position is how good you are. If somebody sees more than you, he beats you, and it's just like that on all the rating classes. The higher you get, the smaller the mistakes become, and the more precise technique is needed to win a game. And maybe a grandmaster would sit and tear this thing apart against me and show me everything that's just wrong with what I said. Well, I'm not a grandmaster. I don't pretend to be, but I can analyze a position, and this is one of the methods I use. I say, well, what happens if I play this? The idea being to keep b6 away, because what happens is b6 becomes a nuisance, and it's going to cause the exchange of this dark squared bishop, which black needed to keep on the board. Sometimes a knight can be better than a bishop, but it turns out the knight is better than the light squared bishop. So in this case, black wants to keep the bishop on the board. Now, it might seem kind of contradictory, because you're saying, well, if I want to keep the dark squared bishop on the board, why would I want to keep the dark squared bishop on the board? You might ask. I mean, it gets a little confusing. The point is you want to have both of the bishops on the board. It doesn't matter whose dark squared bishop is better. You want them both on the board, because at some point you'll be able to use the two of them against the knight. You can eventually do something to make that knight not as good as it is, so that white will miss the presence of that of his light squared bishop. So if white gives away control of or tries to transfer the knight over to b6, as they say, black doesn't have to go for that maneuver. So the next way to assess this position is what happens if white keeps the knight on f5 and says, stew in your own juices, with black. Black's bishop's on d8, rooks aren't connected. Suppose white tries another logical plan. He doesn't go for occupation of b6. Well, the natural thing that one would look at probably would be doubling the rooks on the d file. I mean, that's a nice open file. Okay, so black needs to follow suit. Now, Oh, you can't play bishop d8 yet. I'm sorry. That was one of the keys here, keeping the knight on f5. You don't want to give up a knight check and lose your bishop. So black has to go through this funky maneuver. Okay, h5. Okay, now we play rook d1, and there we've kicked the knight out. Okay, and now now we'll start playing the other plan. The knight goes to d6, and this comes here, and we bring this in. Now black's ready to contest the d file. Okay, and in some respects we're very close to what we had before. Okay. Oh no, e5's not hanging. Okay, so if white proceeds with this maneuver here to try to trade the dark squared bishops, black is able to prevent that once again, and then just simply drop the bishop back to b8, and there you have it. It's that simple. Okay, so there's one other plan white can try. You might ask, well, after bishop d8, what if, with all that, if white foresees all this and says, well, I don't want you to get your situation resolved over there on the king side with those pawns, I'm going to stop you from playing h5. Suppose white plays g4. Aha! Now you're stuck with those crummy pawns. Well, now black needs a new plan. Okay, obviously, black needs a new plan. He can't play g6. So now the fact that the pawn on h6 is here really makes it so that black's pawns are all messed up. You know, this knight and this bishop are working great against them. What can black do to prevent it? Well, he can play, to stop this mess, he can play king h7 and then play g5. But then wrong arrow. His king's out of play. Let's just take a look. Okay, king here, and we'll go through a natural move. Now g5. Now there's not going to be a fork on this square. Well, but actually we don't even have to play g5. We can go ahead with our bishop d6 in this case. But you see, the drawback is that I'm glad I don't have to play this g5. I'm doing this on the fly. You know, I analyze things. I see enough. I understand it. I don't set a perfect script up here. It'd be impossible to get these done. Otherwise, it's just all what do I see as I evaluate. So that's just the way I fly. Okay, so now let's bring this over here. But you see, white's not ready to contest b6 now. So black just swings along here goes about his business, and he's happy to go into a two bishop versus knight ending. Okay, the only drawback with this strategy is that the black king is out of play. Now, this actually may be poor for white to try this, simply because eventually black's going to achieve his objective and trade rooks and get into an ending that has the two bishops versus the bishop and knight, and now the white pawns are a little weak. Okay, there's a lot of weak squares, entry points for the bishop and the knight. I think black's better here. So black had, in my opinion, black had the better game. It's open to debate if somebody wants to tell me otherwise, but I think black had the better chances in this ending. But you know, how do you see all these things? Well, you play a longer time control than 45-45. Okay, that's that's it. I don't know how much time black spent on the move. Let's see. Do I still have it here? Let's bring it up. Yeah, I do. Let's just see. So the critical move to me in this game was bishop d. When he played bishop f6, we should have played bishop d8. Is this the right game? No, that's not the right game. Here it is. Okay, so his clock from 34:38, it went down to 34:09. Okay, so that means 29 seconds evaporated plus his 45. He took 1 minute and 15 seconds on the move. Well, he had 34 minutes left. You know, a lot of times we don't want to, psychologically, we don't want to play moves like bishop d8. You know, who wants to play that move? It seems to confound everything we're trying to do. The rooks are not connected. White's on the open file. But really, as I pointed out, what can white do on that open file? The answer is nothing. Okay, so he had 34 minutes. If he'd said, if he just said, I've got the two bishops, how can I use them best? Let me take 10 minutes to figure this out and figure out what's the better square, f6 or d8. And if he said, if I put it on f6, White's going to get his bishop on b6, and then I'm going to end up having to trade my bishops. Now I still have the bishop for knight, but I think it's better to have two bishops versus a bishop and knight. More pieces is better. Okay, so bishop d8 it is. Now how long did I decide to do that? Took 1 minute, and about the time that Black took. And there's one other plan I could come up for White, and that's to play a4 with the idea of a5, so you can wedge things in. Now the question is, does Black have time to play b5 here? That's a tricky question. Does he? He might not, because you don't want to necessarily give White a pass pawn, because there's a pin here. What else can Black do here? Well, Black can kind of hedgehog it a little bit and play maybe play bishop b6. Oh, there's a tactic here. Dang it! The tactic is deflection. Well, White's. Let's see. Let's take a look. Now gets a little tricky. Yeah, I'm gonna grab this. I don't know. This is good for Black. It's tricky. A4 is definitely an interesting move. Requires more analysis, but chess is like that. We can only respond. We can look in the generalizations and then try to decide what the best candidate moves for White are. I give four interesting candidate moves for White after bishop d8. What did I say? I said g4, a4, knight to d6, and with the idea of knight here and plunking the bishop in, and rook d2. So I gave 4 candidate moves for White. I'm sure Black has some remedies. Again, we could just let White do that. Let's put the rook on c8. Why c8, you ask? I'll show you why. Okay, we're going to avoid trading rooks. Now we get to keep the rooks on. Okay, this is not working. There's a knight fork on e7. So rook can't go to c8. Well, you know what? I can put the rook. Let's see. No, I can't put it on e8. Well, a4 is certainly an interesting move. Might have to go back to this idea here and chase the knight out. Okay, where's the knight going to go? d6, right? Okay, now let's go back to bishop c7. Bishop allows bishop b6, and we can't drop the bishop back to b8. So White's the objective here is White wants to get bishop b6 in. I still have a feeling Black's a little better here, but this might be an improvement for White based on the other stuff. But one thing that's different, you see, as I said earlier, this pawn on h6 proved to be lost. This might be a little better for White. This might be a better plan. Of that fourth candidate move, a4 may be enough. It's tricky. It's tricky to say the least. Let's see. I don't ever want to play e4 and open up this possible diagonal. I don't want to shut this bishop in. Let's see. So but it's unfortunate for Black. He has to stop and do this maneuvering on the king side. Spend those 2 tempos. Why? Because of his weakness. Let's suppose instead we put the rook on e8. This takes away this possibility of the check. Let's forget about the pawn thrust. Okay. Now White goes here. Now we can move the bishop. Okay. The problem is the problem is the bishops aren't going to, or the bishop's still coming to b6. We've taken away this check. Now let's see. Now if we go here, unfortunately he's getting. Oh no, we can't go there. There's a knight fork on d6. Okay. Well, maybe this is a time where we're going to have to just let him play the bishop to b6 and trade things off. I mean, I'm spending a lot of time on this because my feeling is black is better, and black certainly had the reason to think so when he took on e4. White played the knight h4 and black took on e4. Okay, the king move here. The purpose of this is get the king a little closer to the center and free. We still can't move these guys. We're not going to. Trying to free this rook. I mean, we've got e7 owned now. We've got 3 pieces on it. The bishop's covering it. The rook's covering it. The king's covering it. Now let's see. Let's go ahead and try taking this guy. Okay. Now, as I say, with the king over here, this rook is free to run. So is this one. We can go to the D file, and it might be that this pawn on b6 is a weakness. Maybe this pawn can be assaulted. So maybe. Oh, wait, there's a great move here. Or no, it's not really a great move. But we're threatening a great move. Black is threatening to stick the bishop here. At least puts it on a better diagonal. Well, I mean, puts it on the center, and it'd be going both ways, and as well as have space to come back. Just having a bishop in the center just looks kind of fun. I don't know. This is probably better for black, but I basically have to leave this to your imagination as to what could happen, and there's an infinite number of possibilities. The fact is, black and white didn't go into this line, even though it was possible. Ideally, when you play a game of chess, you see hundreds of lines that never occur. The only one that occurs is the one that you actually play, and the way you get better is evaluate a position or analyze a position and look at the different possibilities. Then you pick up some ideas and strategies. And if this was a correspondence chess game, you could have a field day with it, because you've got even longer than this video allows. So let's see what happened and why white got the better of this. We'll see here in a little bit. Okay, so c4. Now, everything black's doing looks logical, but you see the problem here. Here's the problem: is this b6 square. Now, it's normally not good to trade pieces to develop your urge. You see, both sides have an active rook, and both sides have a passive rook. Active rooks designated by circles, passive rooks with the arrow. So what's going to happen is black's going to trade his active rook for white's passive rook. And it also falls in line with the idea: don't make exchanges that develop your opponent's pieces. But it's okay in respect is. A lot of things are true, as I was showing in the other positions. What can white do on this D file? And the answer is he can't. He can't do anything. Black's got it covered. But here the white position is a little better than some of those other lines I showed, simply because white's gotten rid of his passive rook. So that's one fundamental drawback with what's happened here is this position is not as good for black as all the ones I was demonstrating. And now he tries to get rid of that annoying knight, because it is annoying, but it just doesn't want to go away. It's going to go make trouble, so he comes back. Now maybe black's happy with the draw. Okay, fine. If you're happy with the draw, that's good. I really don't know what team standing is, but I kind of thought that black had better, but maybe he doesn't so much now. But white doesn't want to draw. White's trying to press on here. And I think with good reasons. White's got a little more active game. Black can't put his rook on any of those 3 squares, right? They're all covered. Okay, so how does black continue? Now he plays bishop d8. So here's, like I say, is the whole fly in the ointment, so to speak. Black needed to keep that bishop on and coordinate everything else, because now it's gone. And that's the whole difference. Now, logically, one would say, but black has the bishop for the knight. There's pawns on both sides of the board. Well, that's true, but the problem is that some of black's pawns are on light squares. And that is where the problem is. And a knight can be better than the bishop if depending on the color of the squares the pawns are on. And really, the game is still, it's close to even. You wouldn't think that black would win this, or that white would win this, but black shouldn't win. Black had winning chances in the other line. He doesn't have them in this one. So now he finally gets g6 in. But you know what's funny is his problems on the king side still aren't over with. There's all kinds of problems, and all goes back to that weak pawn move, h6 in the opening. Now here's kind of a funny move. White's planning to shove his a pawn. I guess he figures the only way he can get anywhere is to shove his a pawn. Okay, and this might have been too reactionary. I don't think the timing was right for it, but the time was to centralize the king. Okay, White's going to do what he's going to do, but let's look at this. Okay, let's centralize the king. Okay, now we're attacking the knight. Okay, whoopee. Okay, so now we're on that. Now we need a square for this this guy, right? Okay, let's try here for the sake of anything else. Now let's put a little pressure on d6 and covered. Okay, problem solved. Now the knight on d6 has some problems here. It's the pawn on c7 is its anchor. That knight might not be able to stay there. What about this, you ask? Okay, the idea is if rook takes, you're going to push again. Well, I think you can cover that. Well, you could also hit this. Well, now you're, I don't know. Let's see what's happening here. My feeling is black's okay in this. It should be a theoretically drawn position. Okay, let's see. You could also, let's see, bishop takes. We don't want to give the piece up, do we? We get it back. No, we don't want to do that. Now it's over because after rook b6, there's a little nasty discovered check. Ouch. Okay, don't hit revert. It'll take too far back. Okay. I'm just wondering if white can get anywhere with this. Let's see. So pawn takes. Now clearly rook takes is bad. That's just going to bring the king over, and then white's down a pawn. Can he get away with b6? That's interesting. Sacrifice. The idea is to try to sacrifice the knight. No, that's no good. Or is it? b7. Threatening to play b8. That stops it. Yeah, that does it. Okay. Had to check. Okay. So that leaves this move. No. Pawn takes. Yeah, you're just losing the pawn. So black's got the bases covered. But you see, black's king's going to be in a little bit of trouble here in a little bit. It's partly because of the pawn structure, and we'll see why. We'll see why shortly. Anyway, he doesn't. Well, let's just hit revert, and we're sure we're in the main line. Suddenly, the white knight gets active, and the two white pieces are getting out or outdueling the two black pieces here. And wisely takes this pawn, and look at that nice active knight, and it's gaining time. And out of the blue, there's this threat of a fork, and there's that pawn. You know, the pawn I said would be lost is lost. And objectively, black is still close to a draw. You would think that, you know, black could draw this, that white can't do enough on the king side. But surprise, surprise, it happens. Black proceeds to misplay this. looks logical to put the rook on the 7th. I'm just kind of run through it. It's kind of beyond the scope of this. But notice the one thing that's in this position. Black has down a pawn. He has 3 pawns. They're all in the color of his bishop. That's not good, and that's gonna play. Now, White just starts shoving his pawns, and Black just sits there and does nothing. And the White position advances, and Black just shuffling his pieces around. So Black's asking for disaster here. I think if he had set up any kind of reasonable pawn structure, maybe get a pawn on a black square, G5 if anything, White probably wouldn't win this, but he might. Who knows? But there's just a lot of maneuvering done, and Black's not accomplishing anything with this maneuvering. White's just slowly improving his position, and now he finally decides it's time to do something with the king, and get it closer to the center. But look at the White king; it's coming in. Here it comes, and all of a sudden, what has Black really done in the last 20 moves of maneuvering? He hasn't done anything, and White's got his pawns up, his king up. Black's just assuming this game's a draw, and it's far from it. And all of a sudden, got to be very careful. There was a mate threat right here. If Black is not careful, boom, checkmate. How could this be? Because Black's just been shuffling his pieces and not paying attention to the game. And I'll bring up the timestamp here in a minute. White slowly starting to improve his position. Now, it was probably wrong to shove that A pawn, but it really, those pawns don't even figure much in what transpires here. He just gets another weak square. Now, after all this, White has a passed pawn. Okay? Now, suddenly there's that mate threat again. And Black checks White out of there. But now you got to deal with the mate. And that allows the rook trade. And now, in this position, White has virtually 0 losing chances. And all the winning chances. And White owns the dark squares. And that's what's going to doom Black. Let me bring up the timestamp a second. Oops, wrong one. There we go. How much time we're on move? What? 60. White's moving quicker than Black. Black is taking his time. He's down around 12 minutes, 13 minutes. I'm not going to... So at least Black is trying, but he didn't do anything with his pawn structure. His pawn structure basically remained unchanged until White challenged it. He needed to gain some space, get the pawns up to F6 and G5 on dark squares. But now White just uses technique. He's going to use the dark squares to invade. This king is going to go to E7, and where White can't or Black can't do a thing about it. And he's going to advance that pawn up at his leisure. He's going to remaneuver his knight. Here it comes. He's a little bit of dancing around trying to find the path, but eventually White finds the right method. Now he finds the key. Let's get the king up, and Black really doesn't have time to go after this pawn. It's just going to leave him too messed up over here. We'll take a look at it in a second, just to be sure. Now he keeps White out of, or Black out of that square, and as I said, the king's headed for this square where he can't be evicted. And now a little maneuvering, check, and then here comes this pawn, and now no matter what White, even though Black wins this pawn is too deadly. Here, I'll just show you. You're going to check. Doesn't matter where the king goes. This knight is headed for E6 at some point, and which will stop the pawn from promoting. Like I say, now if you come to H6, you don't even need to put the pawn on or the knight on E6. You can just go here directly, and the threat is to make a queen. So even here's the case where it just falls. Okay, so now knight E6, bishop takes, king takes, and then we reach a position that we all know wins. Okay, so let's go back to the main line, back up a few moves, and ask ourselves what happens if that one question I had. Let's see. What happens if black goes for this pawn? And I think that's fatal. Let's see. See, that keeps the black king out of g6. This pawn on f7 is a goner. So let's try to get the king back. Check. Check. And we reach a similar position. The knight occupies e6 and escorts the pawn through. So it was a very interesting ending. I didn't spend much time on the ending itself, simply because white did exactly, the very end part, white did exactly what he wanted to. White handled that ending perfectly, and black didn't challenge white at all in any kind of setup. Let's just go back about 40 moves and see what's the command. Back 80. That might do it. See, we're not quite. Let's go back about 20 more. Back 20. Okay, just so we can get to the point where white won the pawn. Whoops. Just take one final look at this. Okay. What if black just plays a move like g5? Okay. White can still get an outside pass pawn at some point, but for the moment, black's on the 7th rank. Okay. I don't think this check does white much good. Eventually, like I say, if black needs. This is the kind of position black should keep the rook on the board, especially since he has the better one. But you see, white generated a lot of threats, with his rook and knight. Basically based on the vulnerable black king. Here, the black king isn't so vulnerable, and it resumes an active role. I think g5 gives pretty good drawing chances. Again, black could still lose it. White can play on for a win and see what black does. Black will have to prove he can draw, and that's chess. Okay. Anyway, this very interesting game. I wanted to say what I said about it, just simply because that's what it seemed like to me. There was a possibility. I invite any discussion on this and all of my videos. Thanks so much for your time. Take care.